What is going on, fellow FFBE players out there? I know a lot of you guys out there have been seeing a lot of Aldore King Rain friends around. You guys heard me talk about how Hyoh makes a pretty good partner for him. So we're going to be breaking into this down, this pretty simple team composition here of Aldore King Rain and Hyoh, and how to maximize them as a team together. Thankfully, though, it's not going to be too hard to figure out what you're going to want to do when using a King Rain with a Hyoh. Between the two of these characters, Aldore King Rain is going to do more damage, and basically what you're going to want to try to do with your Hyoh, whether it's your Hyoh or your friend's Hyoh, is try to mimic Aldore King Rain's rotation as best as possible. And his rotation breaks down into this. He wants to limit burst as much as possible. Now, you can also use other team members to help them do this, but Aldore King Rain and Hyoh can pretty much limit burst every other turn based on the skills that they have access to now with CG Hyoh's Latent point skills, as well as his ability awakening skills. In Aldore King Rain just comes with all that stuff naturally now. He does have a skill that he did just get from the series bonus boss battle skills from JP. Remember, guys, we are getting those on our characters as a innate passive now. There's no like series bonus boss battle or enlightenment skills for new characters when they come out. They're just going to have them in their kit. That's why Aldore King Rain has a cooldown skill available pretty early on in his skill tree. Extra Saber was one of his enlightenment point skills. Thankfully, we don't have to unlock those things anymore. And it's very prevalent because it increases his limit burst gauge by 30 right away. So what are the skills that we're going to be using here between Hyoh and Aldore King Rain back and forth? So basically, what you're going to want to be doing with Aldore King Rain, you're going to try to mimic with Hyoh. And basically what you do with Aldore King Rain pretty easily is on turn 1, he's going to have triple cast unlocked. And he can triple cast any of these 3 skills that you want to. And what you're going to be doing here, 9 times out of 10 for your general sort of encounter right away, is you're going to be using Complete Awakening, which gives you a nice defense break on the enemy. That's pretty helpful there. It gives you a nice 250% attack buff for 4 turns. It's going to make you immune to attack break, and it's going to give you triple cast again for later on. You're going to want this triple cast for later on. This can help you keep your limit burst up, and you're also going to use this for the 250% attack buff. After you use Complete Awakening, you're going to be using Soul Blood, which gives you a 220% limit burst damage for 2 turns. So it's going to buff your limit burst next turn, and it's going to fully increase your limit burst gauge. Those are primarily the 2 things you're using. Now, the third thing you're going to be using is going to be dependent on what you can do with your Hyoh. Now, the big difference between Aldore King Rain and Hyoh is Aldore King Rain has triple cast on turn 1, and Hyoh does not. And there's 2 big skills that Hyoh is going to want to cast here on turn 1 with his double blade skill. Now, what you're going to be needing to do in order to do this, you have to upgrade double blade right here to +2. This allows you to cast any of his skills. If you do not have this at +2, you're not going to be able to double cast Way of the Void +2 on turn 1. You're going to want to have double blade +2, Way of the Void +2. This allows you to mimic unlocking triple blade for multiple turns. It's also going to allow you to mimic the 250% attack buff. The other skill that you're going to be using is one of his latent abilities. These are the enlightenment point abilities here. You're going to want to have these on your Hyoh as well. You're going to need Blade of Despair for later on, but you're also going to be needing Trace of Rain as well. This is going to upgrade your limit burst, and that is going to be very prominent and very prevalent when using these 2 characters together. The next skill that you're going to want to do, make sure that you have enhanced, is going to be his Spirit plus 20% skill. This will, at +2, turn into an entirely different skill. It's going to turn into a cooldown skill that's going to mimic Aldore King Rain's cooldown skill, where he gets a giant 275% limit burst damage buff for 2 turns to the caster. It's also going to fully fill his limit burst for Hyoh, and it's also going to give you 150% human killer buff for 2 turns as well, which is a nice little damage buff there if you're going up against a human-based enemy. So as you can see here, they're going to be doing 2 very similar things. They're going to be getting that attack buff. They're going to be getting that full limit burst gauge, the limit burst damage buff, and they're going to be unlocking triple cast. So those are the 2 things that they can do at the same time. Now, notably, what you're going to be using on these characters is your strongest 2-handed weapon, and most of the time that's going to be a non-elemental weapon for you guys out there. Aldore King Rain does get to cast an extra skill, so you can pick between either a Fire Imbue, an Earth Imbue, or a Lightning Imbue. Now, Hyoh cannot do that because he can only double cast on turn 1. Unless, of course, you get the counter on a preemptive attack, but that's really not going to happen here. We're going to talk about double cast only, so you're not going to be able to imbue your Hyoh. This is where someone like CG Lydon Fina comes into play, someone like Sylvie comes into play, something like that. So if you have someone who can imbue your characters, or at least just Hyoh, but can imperil for you, you're going to be using one of Aldore King Rain's imperil skills for the imperil, either fire, earth, or lightning, depending on what of the 3 elements you can imbue your Hyoh with. Now, if you have someone who can imbue them with whatever you want, this opens up Aldore King Rain to do a nice supportive skill 9 times out of 10. In this footage, you'll see where I use these characters together. I'm using Energy Wall Rise here to give everyone a 3000 HP barrier on turn 1. So I get to buff up Aldore King Rain's Limit Burst, fill his Limit Burst gauge up, give them that a nice attack buff. Hyoh does the same thing, and then Aldore King Rain can give everyone like a nice 3000 HP barrier. You can also, do a 80% attack, defense, magic, and spirit buff for your whole team if you don't have something better than that. You can also do like a 50% break if you're using this as a newer player. You don't have a nice breaker yet for the attack and magic break, because remember, you are getting the 74% defense break, so you already have that covered. So that's pretty much what you're doing there with Aldore King Rain and Hyoh. Now that's going to be your turn 1. You're going to unlock your Limit Burst gauge to full. You're going to get that attack buff. You're going to unlock triple cast, which is pretty important for the following turn. So that's turn 1. Turn 2, obviously, you're just going to use your Limit Burst. Thankfully, they both have the same frames for their Limit Burst, both 30-hit skills. They chain real well together, both hard-hitting attacks. And if you are like a newer player with either an Aldore King Rain or a Hyoh, and you have a really strong friend unit, the battle might just end there depending on what trials you're doing. If you're not doing like the newest trials, right, the newest series bonus boss battle stuff, if you're still working your whip through some of the fights, if you have a relatively strong character but your friend unit is incredibly powerful, that might just end the fight right there because of those giant Limit Burst damage buffs. Now, if the boss doesn't just get ended right then and there from the Limit Burst, you're in luck, because the synergy between the 2 characters does not end there either. So what you're going to be needing to do after that is you're going to be needing to chain a little bit, and you want to get your Limit Burst back as fast as possible. Luckily, Aldore King Rain and Hyoh have a nice synergy with each other here. Hyoh comes in with the Blade of Despair, his other Enlightenment Point skill here, and Trace of Crimson Rain, his second Enlightenment Point skill here. So Blade of Despair here, you can see right here the multipliers, right? Nothing super insane. 1.0, ignore 50% defense. 1.5, ignore 50% defense. But the most notable thing here is going to increase your Limit Burst gauge by 10 to the caster. And you're going to be triple casting this skill, so you're going to get 30 Limit Burst crystals back from triple casting Blade of Despair, which is the exact cost of CG Hyoh's Limit Burst. On top of that, the multipliers actually be quite a bit higher if you have Trace of Crimson Rain, which is why you also want to have this Enlightenment Point skill learned, because it's going to give you a very nice 4.5 modifier buff every turn as long as Aldore King Rain is in your party and alive. This bumps this modifier through the roof. It goes from a very substandard 5.0 multiplier above above 20 times multiplier there. So you're going to be doing significant damage with Blade of Blade of Despair level 2. Blade of Trace of Crimson Despair, we're going to call it. So that's pretty much what Hyoh's going to be doing. He's going to be Limit Bursting, using Blade of Despair to get his Limit Burst gauge back up. Limit Bursting, Blade of Despair to get his Limit Burst gauge back up. How are you going to be doing this with Aldore King Rain? Well, Aldore King Rain has 2 skills as well. We already talked about the first one here, which is the Soul Blood, which gives him a full Limit Burst gauge and then increases his Limit Burst damage by 220%. You can use this every 4 turns, so you can't just use this every other turn. You have to have something else in there, which is exactly what he has. He has Extra Saber here, which is Stardust Ray, so this is going to chain with other Stardust Ray, all those skills that Hyoh is using, but Extra Saber is going to give him 30 Limit Burst gauge crystals, which is just under what it takes to fill it up. He's at 34. But luckily, right, we're triple casting, so you go ahead and use Extra Saber, and then you just use some of his other Stardust Ray skills here. If you need to re-imbue him, you can use Blaze Saber, Earth Saber, or Spark Saber, or you can just use his other cooldown skills down here when they do come up, right? Royal Saber, just damage. Stardust Ray, King Saber is damage. Stardust Ray. He also has Grand Shelt Saber that you can just use for a filler skill every once in a while there. So that's going to give him the ability to, turn 1, fill up his Limit Burst gauge with Soul Blood, turn 2, Limit Burst, turn 3, you're triple casting again with Hyoh in Aldore King Rain. Aldore King Rain is going to fill his gauge up with Extra Saber plus some chaining crystals because they are triple casting Stardust Ray. Hyoh is going to get his back from using his Enlightenment Point skill, the Blade of Despair. Then after that, you're going to be Limit Bursting again with their Nova skills. And then you're going to be going back up in your cooldown skill for Aldore King Rain will be back up, and you're going to be using Soul Blood again, and Hyoh is going to triple cast Blade of Despair 3 times. You're going to be able to use Soul Blood and then 2 Stardust Ray skills, so you'll be able to use 2 skills that chain together. But the main thing here, guys, is that you're going to go ahead and fill their limit burst gauges up all the time as much as possible, because that is where the vast majority of their damage comes from, and they'll have a big burst damage window every time their big cooldown skills do come up, which is going to be, as we said, the big bad Way of the Void for the attack buff, which Aldore King Rain has a very similar skill to Way of the Void, as well as the other skill here that Hyoh gets from leveling his spirit buff up to Bloodthirsty Swordsman for that nice 275%. That's when the big damage comes out, but they still do a bunch of damage with their limit bursts, especially Aldore King Rain. You want limit burst damage gear, you want killers and stuff like that on. So good partners for this combo. Someone who can go ahead and imbue them. That's going to break the non-symmetry between the dual cast and triple cast. That's really what you're looking for when using these 2 characters together. Other things that you can do is have someone just give them their limit burst back. You don't have to necessarily limit burst, use the SR chaining skills to get their limit burst back up, the limit burst again. If you have the ability to with some insane AoE limit burst gauge fill, like, I don't know, Ignis, the boy with the plan, with the recipe canapé out there, he has insane AoE limit burst gauge fill rate and insane AoE limit burst crystal fill, as well as having access to imbues and imperils for both these units. So he makes a fantastic supporting character for these 2 characters. But with that being said, guys, enjoy the wreckage of Awaken Rain. I called him Awaken Rain again, guys. Aldore King Rain. Maybe he is just awakened with that chair and his evil form. CG Hyoh.